Hi guys, it's Nick. How you all doing? I thought today I would try to put together a video just talking about my life as a reseller um, and just explain to you what I've done over the years really. Pretty much most of my working life I've been a reseller in one form or another, and I thought it might make an interesting video if I just explained kind of where I started and what I've done and what's kind of brought me to this point. So yeah, that's the plan. It might take a while, so yeah, get comfy, and I'll explain how I've ended up where I am today. I mean, it's been now almost 14 years since I had my last full-time paid employment. Um, but to get back to the beginnings of my reselling, you have to go all the way back to the 90s. Um, in 1997, I was working in music shops. I had a job with R Price, which, if you're my age, you'll remember this. They were a great chain of record stores, and I got a job with R Price, and I was working there. This was in 1997. That's when I met my wife in R Price. She became my girlfriend, and she's now my wife. So we've been together for, what's that, 17 years. Yeah, so in 97 I was working for R Price Records, and I just decided one day that I wanted to set up my own record store. I didn't want to be just an employee, another little cog in a wheel, in a big machine rather. And I wanted my own record shop. So also that year was when I started to learn to drive, and that gave me the freedom to go to car boot sales. And that introduced me to the world of reselling really, because I would pick up all of these CDs for £1 or so back then, and yeah, my goal was to open a record store. So I planned it. I started buying up stock at the weekends. I'd work in the record store during the week, and at the weekends go out buying up CDs. And then early in 1998, I walked out on my job with R Price, and set up my own little record shop. I rented space in it's almost like a booth really, in a big building with lots of these little independent retailers in. And I spent all my savings setting this place up and promoting it and doing leaflets, and I hand delivered thousands of leaflets and got this place up and running, and it was starting to do quite well. But it was quite short lived, because what happened was the guy we all as traders used to pay for our space in this bigger building, this guy that we used to pay to rent our space, he wasn't paying the actual owner of the building. He wasn't paying his landlord, as it were. But none of us were aware of this until one day we all turned up for work and the locks had been changed and we couldn't get in because the landlord had pulled the plug on it. And that was it. That was the end of all of my hard work, and that came to an abrupt end. And as a 23-year-old, that was a real kick in the balls. Really, that really hurt, because I'd spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort setting that up, and yeah, it all came to nothing because the rug was pulled out from under me. And yeah, that was a tough introduction to the world of business. Eventually we all got in and we managed to get our stuff out of there, but that was the end of it for me. I had no money, and I went back and got a job with R Price, which by then had been bought out by Virgin, so I started working for Virgin. But my next venture was, because I had all this stock still, I still had a few thousand CDs, and I then set up a mail order exchange business, where I would publish my catalogue of CDs, and you could send me a CD. You'd contact me by email and tell me the CD that you wanted to exchange, or the CDs that you wanted to exchange, and if I thought they were acceptable titles to have in my catalogue, I'd say yep, they're all fine, exchangeable, and then the customer would choose the ones that they wanted. They'd send me theirs, pay me a small commission, small fee for the exchange per disc, and I would send out the ones they wanted. And I still think the idea was great, and it had great potential, but I had no money, and didn't have the money to promote it. And this business model really hinged on doing hundreds, if not thousands, of these exchanges on a monthly basis. And I advertised it nationally in music magazines, but I didn't have enough funding behind me to advertise it well enough, and I got so little trade from it that I quickly realised it wasn't going to work without the funding that I needed. So that came to nothing as well. So as you can see, my first forays into business and into reselling and using secondhand stuff weren't all that successful, to say the least. But I was still going to a lot of boot sales at this time, and I would pick up stuff for myself. I was a collector anyway. I still am in some ways, but I used to collect Nintendo Game and Watches and retro toys and games and CDs for myself. I'm a huge music fan. Music is my passion, so I used to buy a lot of music for myself. And towards the end of the 90s, about 99 I guess it was, I discovered eBay, because I was buying these Nintendo Game and Watches, and I was finding a lot of them, and I was trying to get a complete collection. And I would find them at boot sales and jumble sales regularly, but I was finding the earlier ones and some of the more obscure ones hard to find. So I've heard of eBay, and I thought I'll go on there and try and complete my collection. And I was stunned by how much people were selling these things for on there. Because I tried to buy some, and they'd just go up and up and up into 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds each. And I was like, oh my God, I buy these for £1 or so at the car boot sale. So I quickly put two and two together and thought I could make money here. And that was my introduction to reselling, really. Apart from obviously the second-hand record shop that I'd had, where I used to buy and sell from the public. And yeah, I never really looked back from that point with eBay. And through 2000, I was still working for record shops, but in my spare time I was building my eBay business, and that was starting to grow. And then at the end of 2000, the beginning of 2001, myself and Andrea were living together at this point. We both worked in record shops. And no, actually Andrea by then got a job with Amazon, and she was a book buyer for Amazon. And I was still working in the music shops, and we discovered that Andrea was pregnant. And as a knee-jerk reaction to that news, I decided, right, enough is enough. Working in these record shops and not earning much money and messing around with my own business ideas, I would get myself a decent proper job, as you like, proper job, whatever that is. And I started a fitness regime, and I sent off my applications to the police force, and I got myself super fit, jumped through all the hoops to get into the police force, worked super hard to get in. I went away to police training college and graduated from that, and became a police officer in 2001. And I became a uniformed police officer, but I realised really early on that it wasn't for me. I was like a square peg in a round hole, and I was in the police force for not sure how long it was, 4 or 5 months, and then I left. I just walked out. Well, I was actually out on patrol with my partner, doing a night shift, and we're out in the squad car, and I literally turned to the partner I was with and just said, take me back to the station. And she was a female officer. She said, what's up, are you ill? Do you need to go home? What's up? And I said, no, I'm not ill. I'm perfectly fine. I've just quit the job. And she just looked at me like, what? And yeah, it took me back to the station, and I had a chat with my sergeant there, and that was it. That was my last day on the job. And I was never happier, because it really wasn't for me, and I was really unhappy in that job. But by this point, we had built up our eBay business. Andrea was doing it with me as well. And we'd had Ellen, and Andrea had taken maternity leave from Amazon, but she had no intention of going back. She wanted to bring up Ellen, if at all possible. And working from home would allow Andrea to be a full-time mother and for me to be at home and help to bring up Helen, and it all seemed like a great idea. So yeah, to cut a kind of long complicated story short, we both quit our jobs at that point and we turned our part-time hobby of selling on eBay into our full-time jobs, and that was in 2000 and was it 2001? No, 2002 we went full-time. And yeah, I've not had a paid job since, and neither has my wife. So that's been what is that? So yeah, 13 getting on 14 years. So yeah, we bought and sold anything and everything. Pretty much what I show you in my videos now, what I do now is what I was doing then. I would buy a lot of vintage and retro gaming, as in computer gaming, and 1980s, 1970s toys, that sort of stuff. We used to do an awful lot of that. Books, CDs, DVDs, videos. Videos were still big back then. All of that stuff, and a lot of clothing. We would mainly get our stock from car boot sales, as I do now, and from charity shops. And we did that for about 2 years. No, about a year and a half actually. But we were renting then. We were renting a house, and we had a small sort of 2 up, 2 down little place. And our house, because we were doing everything from home, we didn't have any other storage. Our house just filled up with all of this crap that we were buying and selling. And we had obviously a very small child around, and it just wasn't practical. And both of our backgrounds were in retail, so that was when we made the decision to take what we were doing to the high street and set up a shop. Set up a shop which would trade in entertainment, so your CDs, your DVDs and your games. And it would be like a CEX exchange store, so people would bring their stuff to us and they could sell it to us for cash or exchange it for other goods in the store. And we never imagined that the shop would be a massive success. We wanted the space, and we hoped the shop would do well, but we had space out the back to run our internet business from, and we would use the shop to get stock, and we'd hope that would fuel the internet business. So we set that up at the end of 2003, and the shop just took off. It was an instant huge success, and we ended up running that for 8 years. The first shop, well, let me show you. I've got some pictures here. This was the shop, this was the unit that we found in 2003 in Hitchin. We set up our shop in Hitchin, which is where I live now. At that time we were living in Baldock, and we found this unit, and it was in a complete state. It had been a clothes shop since the 1970s called She, and it was a complete mess. All of these racks were still in here, all these great big wooden racks for the clothing. All of this front was all rotten up here, and these old like canopies were all falling apart. But we got a deal on this place to rent it, and here's a shot of, this is my uncle up here. When he leant against this part when we took the canopies off, and he just went straight through it. It was completely rotten, so we had to replace all of this. That's my father there helping out. So that was us beginning the transformation of the shop. And we worked on that place for about a month to get it all turned around in November of 2003. And when we opened the store, that's what we had turned it into. We called the store Replay, as you can see up there, CDs, games, DVD, buy, sell and exchange. So it was essentially like CEX. And CEX at this point was still a fairly small company. They hadn't really started their big expansion, and there was nothing in Hitchin like this. And it became a huge success. There's my wife, Andrea, just preparing the sign. We did all the signage ourselves to save money. And I shop fitted the whole place myself to save money. Because when we started this, we had very little money behind us. We put all of our savings into it, absolutely everything. And really took a huge gamble on this. So we scrimped and saved to get everything done. And then here's a picture of Ellen. She was, what was she then, about 2 at that point. And this was when I was doing all the shop fitting, so you can see all the work going on in the background. And that's Ellen with her dustpan and brush, helping out. And then this was opening day. That's me and Andrea standing behind the counter in the office out the back. You can see some of the collectible stuff that we had for eBay. There's a Millennium Falcon there, Star Wars, and an AT-AT. So yeah, that's us on opening day. Looking, I don't think I look any older, do I? No, not at all. So yeah, and then this was about 6 months to a year into it. The place had just absolutely exploded, and I'm just surrounded by endless stock. We did a lot of trading cards. These are all packs of trading cards up here. We used to sell tons and tons of trading cards, new, and I did used ones as well, and things like badges and all sorts of stuff we got into. But you could see that the tons and tons of overstocks of, well, these are PS2. PS2 was the big format at that time. So yeah, that became a huge success for us. And it did really well. We stayed in that first shop for about 6 years. And then we expanded it to a bigger shop a bit further into town, and it just kept expanding. Right, sorry about that. I just had to have a big coughing session. I've got a cold and I've got this horrible tickly cough. Anyway, yeah, so we then embarked on a big expansion program for the business, and we moved into a bigger unit, etc. But shortly before we did that, we had a break-in. We'd had, up to this point, 4 or 5 attempted break-ins, because as the business expanded and it was obvious to the undesirable people out there, the burglars and the thieves, that we became a big target, because we had an awful lot of quite high value, easy to sell on stock. And we'd started doing new games as well. We'd got accounts with Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo, and we were stocking all of the new chart games, and we stocked new consoles. We did the new CD chart and the new DVD chart. It became a proper entertainment store by this point. So yeah, we had 4 or 5 attempted break-ins, and then not long before we moved up to the big second unit, we were broken it. The attempted break-ins turned into a real break-in. They managed to get in. I thought I had a lot more pictures, but I've only got a couple. This one shows, see the glass all over the floor. This was, corner of the shop was dedicated to these glass cabinets that were filled with consoles. And you can see where they smashed all of the fronts of them, and they stole in here. These were all new consoles and some second-hand ones. They cleared everything of any real value out of there. They went out the back into the office, and they stole all of the backup copies of the new games. So all by this point, it was Xbox 360 and PS3. They stole pretty much our entire stock holding of new Xbox and 360 and PS3 games, and DS had just been released, and they stole all of that. Yeah, and they got away with many thousands of pounds worth of stuff. They did leave us a present though, which was nice of them. They left us this concrete block, which we assume they used to smash the door in. The door was like smash proof glass or whatever. You couldn't really break it, but I reckon they just hurled this at it that many times that the whole door eventually came off its hinges. Essentially, when we turned up, the door was flat on the floor. Because I got a call from the alarm company at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd been out in London at a party. It was a friend's birthday party, so I'd been out in London with Andrea, drinking all night, and we'd got back from that at, I don't know, 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, and then we got a call from the alarm company, and I couldn't even get in the car and whiz down to the shop and check it out. So I had to ring round and get a taxi in the middle of the night to take me down there, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And I got there and the door was flat. The place was an absolute wreck, and yeah, that was horrific. That really set us back. It nearly made me give up retail at that point, because I don't know, that it was just shocking. I felt completely violated, and it rocked us. It really did. But we took a while, and we got over it, and we became more determined. And that was when we expanded into the second shop. And in the second shop, we had shutters as well, because we were by then completely paranoid about getting broken into. But yeah, the second shop, let me show you a few little pickies of that. This was the front of it. It's not the best of pictures. The window displays weren't up to much at that point, but it was a much larger shop, and it had loads more storage in the basement. This was the shop floor. You can see that the size of the racks. This was the CD catalogue here. This was DVDs, and then gaming was through on this side of the store. There's some more racks. So CD chart, etc. A new CD catalogue, and a shot from behind the counter looking out. It had just grown into a really big place. So this is from behind the counter. There's my Mac there that I used to use, and TV that I used to plug the consoles into to test all the used consoles that we bought. And again, there's our DVD chart. This racking all came out of Woolworths. In, when was it, 2009 I think, Woolworths went under, and I went and bought the chart wall out of the Woolworths in Hitchin. And there's another shot just showing you our back catalogue of PS2 games there, and looking towards the counter. So yeah, it had grown into a really huge place, and our turnover had just gone through the roof, and by this point it was making us really good money. And we'd gone from renting a small place in Baldock to we bought our first flat in Hitchin after a year of having the shop. And then within a year of that, the business had started earning us enough that we sold the flat within a year, and we bought the house I'm in now, this 3-bedroom house in Hitchin. And then about a year or so before we eventually closed this shop, the shop had enabled us to pay off the mortgage completely. So within 5 years we'd paid off the mortgage, which was, you know, exceptional, and we were just amazed at how well it was doing. There's another shot showing you the sort of gaming part, and we had these glass cabinets. We bought new glass cabinets, and they were full of new and used consoles. But we were really burnt out by this. We'd worked so long and so hard. We'd also had loads of grief with staff. We'd had several staff members. Some were fine, but you know, the majority of people we took on just gave us grief and stole from us. One in particular, I won't go into that now, but yeah, so ideally what we would have liked to have done would be to take on staff to run it, or perhaps open another one, but it didn't work out like that. Instead, what we decided was we wanted to get out of retail because we were just completely burnt out, like I say, and we wanted to get some of our lives back because it had taken over our lives. So we had the business valued, and we had a great valuation on the business done, and we advertised it, and we had a lot of interest. But the problem was that at almost exactly the same time, the banking crash happened, and we accepted an offer from this particular chap, and he went off to sort out finance, and he went back to his bank and said, "Yep, I'm gonna buy this business." And that bank, I can't remember which one, had, like the rest of them, just literally at that moment, kind of, the timing was awful, pulled the plug on lending to small businesses, and he couldn't get finance. He couldn't get finance anywhere, so that deal fell through. We then scrabbled around trying to get a deal together because we wanted out, and we had to hand our notice in. We had a break clause on our lease where we could leave without incurring massive penalties, etc. So we were on a short time scale then to hand our notice in to get the break clause. And because these deals fell through, that's what we did, and we ended up just closing the business, which was a shame, but we'd made that decision anyway. We were going to close that and go back to selling online. So I left there, and I left there with tons and tons and tons of stock, ridiculous amounts of stock. Because what I didn't show you in those pictures was the basement. That place had a basement where I stored all of my... Oh, what I didn't say was the whole time we had the shops, we were selling online as well, but we switched over to Amazon, and the whole time we had shops, we would sell on Amazon. And here's some of the Amazon stock. Amazon was perfect for us at this point because we would get thousands and thousands of media products in through the doors, and I would just scan it into Amazon, and if it was worth selling on there, I would sell it on there, and we would turn over ridiculous numbers of items on Amazon. But yeah, as you saw there, the build up of stock, the overstocks and stuff we were selling online, we just had tons and tons of it. So when we closed the shop, this room, which was our garage, was just literally filled with media stock, and I spent the next year and a half or so just selling that off. And then I branched out. I then got into Lego, and for about 6 months I just sold Lego. There's so much money in Lego. And then my wife really got into selling clothing, and we found we were doing really well with clothing. So then we took on some offices in Hitchin with some storage space, and we expanded our clothing business. But I found that I didn't have that level of passion and interest for the clothing. So what we then did was Andrea concentrated on the clothing, and I went complete full circle and went back to buying and selling whatever I could get my hands on. And that's where, you know, the videos and things, that's what the videos show, and what I'm doing now. But if you've seen some of my recent videos, you'll see that now we plan to go back to the high street and expand the clothing business on the high street, because the business model we have with that is much more suited to the high street. And yeah, we've now negotiated a lease on a shop which is about 50 yards from the first one I showed you, this one, the old replay shop. The shop we are just taking on the lease for is on the other side of the road from this, just around the corner. So yeah, we've kind of gone back on ourselves, and we're getting back into retail. So yeah, that's the plan. I'm sorry if that went on forever. I just thought it might be interesting for you guys to see my sort of history of reselling and how I've got to this point, and what little bit of what our plans are for the future. I'd just like to say our plans now are not to be shopkeepers forever. We are trying to create a business model that we can replicate. It's a really difficult thing to get right, and scaling up retail businesses is notoriously difficult, but we're going to give it a go. So we're going to set up the first one, get that in profit, hopefully, who knows, and get it to a point where it makes enough money to put a manager in there, and then we're going to open another one, and then we're going to go open another one, because we don't want to be standing in a shop selling second-hand clothes for the next 10, 15, 20 years. We want to be managing a business. So yeah, that's our long-term goal anyway. So there you go. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you again soon. Cheers.